You know, we often talk about the US Constitution like it's this ancient, untouchable document, carved in stone. But honestly, it's much more like a living piece of software. And over the years, it's had 27 major updates. Today, we're going to go through the patch notes, all 27 amendments that tell the incredible story of America's ever-evolving rulebook.
So that brings up a huge question, right? How do you even change a country's most fundamental rules? Well, the founders knew they couldn't possibly predict the future, so they built in an edit button, the amendment process. They made it tough to use on purpose, but not impossible.
All right, so here's the game plan. We've broken down all 27 amendments into 5 big chapters. We'll start with the people's protections, then move to how freedom was redefined after the Civil War. After that, it's all about getting more voices and more votes. Then, we'll look at the amendments that fine-tuned the government itself, and we'll wrap up with the wild ride that was the Prohibition saga.
Okay, let's kick things off right at the beginning. The first 10 amendments are, of course, the famous Bill of Rights. These were added almost right away. Think of them as the non-negotiable promises made to the American people, a clear line in the sand telling the government this far and no further.
So let's run through these 10 promises real quick. Number 1 gives you your absolute core freedoms: to speak your mind, practice your religion, have a free press, and assemble peacefully. Number 2 is about self-defense. 3 and 4 are all about your personal space. Your home is your own, and the government can't just come searching it without a good reason and a warrant. Then, a whole big chunk, 5 through 8, is about your legal rights. Things like due process, the right to a speedy and fair trial with a lawyer, and protection from cruel punishments. And the last 2 are really interesting. Number 9 basically says, hey, just because we didn't list a right here doesn't mean you don't have it. And number 10 says any powers not specifically given to the federal government belong to the states or to the people themselves.
After the Bill of Rights, things went quiet for about 70 years. The Constitution didn't change at all. Then, the Civil War happened. It was a national trauma that forced America to have a painful, fundamental reckoning with what freedom and citizenship actually meant. And out of that fire came 3 amendments that would literally redefine the country.
First up, the 13th Amendment. It's short, it's powerful, and it's absolutely monumental. In just a handful of words, it wiped the institution of slavery off the books in the United States forever. It was a profound, world-changing moment.
Now the 14th, this one is a huge deal. It does 2 incredibly important things. First, it establishes birthright citizenship. If you're born in the U.S., you are a citizen, period. And second, it guarantees every single person equal protection of the laws. That single clause has become the legal foundation for pretty much every major civil rights battle ever since.
And to complete this transformative trio, we have the 15th. So first, slavery was abolished, then citizenship was defined. This amendment took the next logical step. It said you couldn't deny someone the right to vote because of their race. It was a massive leap towards a more just democracy, though, as we all know, it would take another 100 years of struggle to make that promise a reality for everyone.
You know, speaking of having your voice heard, that fight for the vote is such a central part of this whole story. If you believe that being informed and making your voice count matters, do us a quick favor and hit the like button on this explainer and subscribe to the channel. It really does help us keep this whole thing going.
But the push to make the government more representative didn't stop there. Not even close. The next big wave of changes was all about continuing that trend, bringing more and more people into the democratic fold and giving them a much more direct say in how things are run.
So who got to join the party? Well, the 17th Amendment took the power to choose senators away from state politicians and gave it directly to you, the people. The 19th was, of course, a massive, hard-won victory that finally gave women the right to vote. The 23rd gave the folks living in Washington, D.C. the right to vote for president. The 24th got rid of poll taxes, which were really just a way to keep poor people from voting. And finally, the 26th, passed during the Vietnam War, lowered the voting age to 18. The argument was simple and powerful. Old enough to fight, old enough to vote.
Okay, so not every amendment is some grand declaration about human rights. Some are just really practical. They're like essential system updates, fixing bugs, making things run smoother, and just clarifying the rules of the game. These are the nuts and bolts amendments that keep the whole machine of government from falling apart.
The 12th Amendment was one of the first bug fixes. See, the original system made the runner-up in the presidential race the vice president. Yeah, after the election of 1800 showed what a disaster that could be, having your biggest rival as your VP, they changed it. Now the president and vice president run together as a team. Much better.
Next up, the 16th. This one completely changed how the U.S. government pays for things. As the country got bigger, it needed a steady way to make money. This amendment gave Congress the power to collect an income tax, which is what funds pretty much everything today, from highways and national parks to the military.
The 20th is often called the lame duck amendment. It's a simple, practical fix. It just shortened that long, awkward waiting period between when a new president is elected in November and when they actually take office. This made the transfer of power a whole lot faster and smoother.
For a century and a half, there was an unwritten rule that presidents only serve 2 terms, following George Washington's lead. But then FDR came along and got elected 4 times. After that, the country decided to make that unwritten rule official. The 22nd Amendment formally limited presidents to 2 terms in office.
The 25th Amendment is all about stability at the highest level. It was passed after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy exposed some scary gaps in the rules of succession. This amendment lays out in crystal clear detail exactly what happens if a president dies, resigns, or just can't do their job, making sure there's never any confusion about who's in charge.
And the last one on this list, the 27th, has a totally wild backstory. It was actually proposed way back in 1789 with the original Bill of Rights, but it wasn't actually ratified until 1992. All it says is that if Congress votes to give themselves a pay raise, it can't take effect until after the next election. It's a little check on their power.
All right, now for one of the strangest and most fascinating chapters in all of American history, the great national experiment with banning alcohol. The story of Prohibition is just an incredible case study of the power and the limits of trying to change a country with a constitutional amendment.
This is the only time in U.S. history this has ever happened. The 18th Amendment was passed, banning the sale and transport of alcohol nationwide. But it led to a ton of unintended consequences, like the massive rise of organized crime. So just 14 years later, the country passed the 21st Amendment, which did only one thing. It canceled the 18th. It's amazing, really. It shows that the Constitution is flexible enough to basically say, you know what, we made a mistake. Let's fix it.
And that idea of flexibility is really what this is all about. This quote from Woodrow Wilson just nails it. The Constitution was not made to fit us like a straitjacket. In its elasticity lies its chief greatness. The whole point is that its strength isn't that it's rigid and unmovable. It's that it can stretch and adapt and grow right along with the country. So from guaranteeing our most basic freedoms, to redefining citizenship, to expanding the right to vote, these 27 changes tell the story of a nation that is constantly trying, and sometimes failing, but always trying, to become a more perfect version of itself. And that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. The Constitution has changed 27 times so far. What do you think the 28th will be?